Hi, welcome to today's SE Media webcast. I'm David Myron, Associate Director of Content for Digital Events at Cyber Risk Alliance, and I'll be moderating today's broadcast titled Latest DDoS Trends and the Evolving Threat Landscape, sponsored by Cloudflare. Delivering today's insights will be Vivek Ganti, Security Product Marketing Manager at Cloudflare. Vivek leads product marketing for Cloudflare's DDoS protection solutions. With a background in engineering and more than 7 years of experience in product marketing across cloud security and networking infrastructure, Vivek has a passion for transforming bits and bytes into crisp business outcomes. Before we start, just a couple of housekeeping notes. If you'd like to ask any questions, just select the Q&A button below. If you'd like to access today's slides, just select the handouts button below. And finally, today's webcast will be available for you to view online after the event. With that, let's kick things off. Vivek, welcome to the broadcast.
Thanks so much, David. Everyone, welcome to this webinar on the latest DDoS trends and the evolving threat landscape. I'll be focusing a little bit on the ransom DDoS attacks also, which have made huge headlines lately in the past few months. More about that later. But I want to first begin by talking a little about Cloudflare, who we are, and more importantly, why we exist. I'd like to begin by grounding in Cloudflare's mission because it really guides everything we do. Our mission is bold but simple. It's to help build a better internet. And by a better internet, I mean one that's faster, that's more secure, and more reliable for everyone. And we're achieving on that mission by building a global cloud network, a network that looks something like this. We've diligently spent the past decade building, optimizing, and running that network. It's now one of the world's largest networks and one of the most interconnected networks. We power millions of internet properties, and our network capacity, which is also our DDoS mitigation capacity, is unmatched at 90 terabits per second. We've built this large network to be within milliseconds of not just our customers, but their customers as well. We're a security, performance, and reliability company, and we deliver all the services that you know us for over this global unified network. If there's one thing you should take away from this slide, it's that the scale at which Cloudflare operates is massive. For example, in Q2 of 2021 alone, billion with a B cyber threats each day. And it is because of our distributed global edge network that we have a unique vantage point on the global internet traffic and attack trends that I'll be talking about. So without further ado, let's get into the traffic trends. Let's look at application layer DDoS attack trends. An application layer or layer 7 DDoS attacks they refer to a type of malicious behavior designed to target the top layer of the OSI model. So these are the HTTP gets, HTTP requests, anything that affects the HTTP layer. Let's look at how these attacks were distributed by industry. When we analyze attacks, we calculate the DDoS activity rate, which is a percentage of the attack traffic out of the total traffic, which comprises attack and clean traffic at our data centers. This allows us to normalize the data points and avoid biases towards, for example, a larger data center at Cloudflare that naturally handles more traffic and therefore more attacks. And when we look at all the attacks spread throughout by different industries, we see that consumer services sector was the most targeted industry, followed by government administration and marketing and advertising. Now, when we look at these attacks from the perspective of the source and target countries, there's different ways in which we can analyze it. And to understand the origin of the HTTP attacks, we observed over Cloudflare's network, we look at the source IP address of the client generating the attack HTTP requests. Unlike network layer attacks, which I'll talk about in a few slides as well, source IPs cannot be spoofed in HTTP attacks. A high DDoS activity rate in a given country indicates large botnets operating from within. And no surprise here, China and the US remain in the first and second places, respectively, regarding the percentage of DDoS activity originating from within their territories. In China, more than 7 of every 1,000 HTTP requests were part of an HTTP DDoS attack, while in the US, almost 5 of 1,000 HTTP requests were part of an attack. And for us in order to identify which countries were targets of the DDoS attacks, we break down the DDoS activity by our customers' billing countries. Note that Cloudflare does not charge for attack traffic and has pioneered providing unmetered and unlimited DDoS protection since 2017. But by cross-referencing the attack data with our customers' billing country, we can identify which countries were attacked the most. And looking at data in the second quarter of 2021, we see that organizations in the US and China were the most targeted by HTTP DDoS attacks again. In fact, 1 out of every 200 HTTP requests destined to US-based organizations was part of a DDoS attack. Now, let's look at network layer DDoS attacks. Application layer attacks are not the only type of attacks that threaten our customers. Any network infrastructure that is also exposed to the internet is vulnerable to attacks. In this section, I want to highlight network layer attacks. So these are attacks against entire IP prefixes, data centers, and IP applications. So one thing we consistently observe, and this is consistent throughout the industry, is that Cloudflare continues to see a large percentage of DDoS attacks that last under an hour. In Q2, over 97% of all DDoS attacks lasted less than an hour. Short bursty attacks may attempt to cause damage without being detected by DDoS detection systems. And DDoS services that rely on manual analyses and mitigation systems may prove to be useless against these attacks because they're over before the analyst even identifies the attack traffic. Often what we've seen at Cloudflare is that even the use of short attacks are maybe used to probe the cyber defenses of the target. Load testing tools are widely available on the dark web today, and automated DDoS tools are available as well. And they can generate short bursts of SYN floods, for example, and then follow up with another short attack using a different attack vector. This allows attackers to understand the security posture of their targets before they decide to launch larger attacks at larger rates and longer durations, which come at obviously a much larger cost. In other cases, what we've seen is attackers generate small DDoS attacks as proof and warning to the target organization to really show that they can cause more real damage later on. It's often followed by a ransom email demanding payment to avoid suffering an attack that could more thoroughly cripple network infrastructure. This really highlights the need for an always-on and automated DDoS protection approach. DDoS protection services that rely on manual rerouting, analysis, and mitigation may prove to be useless against these types of attacks because they're over before any analyst can even detect them. And now let's look at what kind of attack vectors these hackers are using. The attack vector is really a fancy term used to describe the attack method. The most popular method in Q2 of 2021 was SYN floods. They constituted more than half of all attacks, and this was followed by reset attacks, UDP floods, and DNS-based DDoS attacks. So what is a SYN attack? A SYN flood is really a flood of TCP packets with a synchronized flag turned on. It aims to exploit the handshake process of a TCP connection. By repeatedly sending the initial connection request packets with the synchronized flag turned on, the attacker attempts to overwhelm the router's connection table that tracks the state of the TCP connections. The router then replies back with a packet that contains the synchronized acknowledgement flag and allocates a certain amount of memory for each given connection and falsely waits for the client to respond with a final acknowledgement. Given a sufficient number of SYNs that occupy the router's memory, the router is then unable to allocate further memory for legitimate clients, causing the textbook case of a denial of service. SYN floods continue to be the most popular attack vector used solely because they're easier to generate with a botnet and they cripple any kind of network infrastructure. SYN is so fundamental to network communication. Now, if you look at protocol attacks, the emerging threats that we see quarter over quarter, that we keep track of, these included amplification DDoS attacks that abuse the quote of the day protocol service, which increased by over 100% quarter over quarter. Quote of the day protocol was defined in RFC 865 and can be sent over either the TCP or UDP protocols. It was originally designed for debugging and a measurement tool with no specific syntax for the code. We've also seen 107% increase quarter over quarter in UDP port map and echo attacks, all of which are really old attack vectors. This indicates that attackers are really digging up old methods and attack tools to try and overcome protection systems. And as we've seen in the previous quarters, the adoption of QUIC protocol continues to increase. Consequently, so do attackers over QUIC, or more specifically, floods or amplification attacks of non-QUIC traffic in places where we'd expect to see the QUIC traffic. In Q2 of 2021, these attacks increased by 109% quarter over quarter. This continued trend may indicate that attackers are now attempting to abuse quick design ports and gateways into organizations' networks, searching for vulnerabilities and security holes. Now, let's look at where these attacks are originating from a network layer perspective. In this report, we measure the attack traffic observed at a Cloudflare data center relative to the non-attack traffic observed at the same data center for geo-based distribution. And when analyzing network layer DDoS attacks, we bucket the traffic by the Cloudflare edge data center locations where the traffic was ingested, and not by the source IP as we did for application layer DDoS attacks. And the reason for this is that when attackers launch network layer DDoS attacks, they can very easily spoof source IP addresses in order to obfuscate the attack source and introduce randomness into the attack properties, which may make it harder for simple DDoS protection systems to block the attacks. Now, we're able to derive the source country based on the spoofed source IP. We would get a spoofed country. And Cloudflare is able to overcome the challenge of spoofed IPs by displaying the attack data by the location of the Cloudflare's data center in which the attack was observed. And the reason we're able to achieve geographical accuracy in our report is because we have data centers in over 200 cities around the world. In 2021, in the second quarter of 2021, our data centers in Haiti observed the largest percentage of network layer DDoS attack traffic, followed by those in Brunei and China. At Cloudflare, our teams have been exceptionally busy this past quarter, rapidly onboarding a multitude of new and existing customers that have either received a ransom letter or were under an active DDoS attack in the last quarter. And one such customer is Hypixel, the development studio behind the world's largest Minecraft minigame server. They have over 24 million total unique logins to date and hold a world record of 216,000 concurrent players on PC. The gaming industry, no surprise, is often subject to some of the world's largest volumetric DDoS attacks. And as a marquee brand, Hypixel attracts more than its fair share. And as you might assume, for a gaming company like Hypixel, uptime and high performance are fundamental to the functioning of their servers. Any perceived downtime or noticeable lag could result in an exodus of gamers. When Hypixel was under a massive DDoS attack campaign, they turned to Cloudflare to extend their services with Cloudflare to include Magic Transit, which I'll talk about in a few slides. That is our DDoS protection service for network infrastructure. It uses BGP to protect any network infrastructure that is exposed to the internet. After our teams rapidly onboarded them overnight, Cloudflare was able to automatically detect and mitigate DDoS attacks that were targeting their network infrastructure, several of which were over 620 gigabits per second. And this attack mostly comprised TCP floods and UDP amplification attacks. And in this graph, what you see on the right, the various colors represent the multiple Cloudflare systems that contribute to the detecting and mitigating of the multi-vector attacks. And even as the attack patterns were changing in real time, Magic Transit was able to shield Hypixel's network effectively. In fact, because all of their clean traffic was routed over Cloudflare's high-performance low-latency network, Hypixel's users noticed no change in gamer experience, even during an active volumetric DDoS attack. And Hypixel's journey with Cloudflare started a few years ago. They initially employed Cloudflare Spectrum to protect their gaming infrastructure against DDoS attacks. And as their user base grew and as they developed more and more games, they adopted additional Cloudflare products to bolster their robustness and resilience of all of their network infrastructure. Today, they use multiple Cloudflare products and include CDN, rate limiting, Spectrum, Argo Smart Routing, which is our traffic acceleration product, and of course, load balancing. And they do all of this to really build and secure infrastructure at scale and provide their gamers around the world real-time gaming experiences. Now, besides these general trends, there's one trend that's another disturbing trend that I want to talk about, and that's the rise in extortion and ransom-based DDoS attacks targeting organizations around the world. We've seen and heard of these increased ransomware and ransom DDoS activity around the world, but I want to make a little bit of a distinction between ransomware and ransom DDoS attacks. They're both related, but not the same. Ransomware is malicious software that encrypts an organization's systems and databases. It renders them inaccessible and unusable. It's malware, essentially. It encrypts the device and can propagate into the entire network and their different servers and employees' devices. The attacker then demands money, usually in the form of Bitcoin, in exchange for decrypting the organization's systems and then granting access back to their systems. Unlike a ransomware attack, a ransom DDoS attack does not encrypt a system's a company's systems. It aims to knock them offline just because they're exposed to the internet. What makes a ransom DDoS attack even more dangerous is that they do not require the attacker to gain access to a business's internal systems to execute the attack. But with a strong DDoS protection strategy in place, a ransom DDoS attack has little to no effect on businesses. Now, regardless of whether it's a ransomware or ransom DDoS attack, they're impacting most industries around the world: the financial industry, the transportation, oil and gas, consumer goods, and even education and healthcare. Who are these folks? They're entities claiming to be Fancy Lazarus, Fancy Bear, Lazarus Group, and most recently the Russian group called Revil, which are launching ransomware and ransom DDoS attacks against companies' websites and network infrastructure unless a ransom is paid before a given deadline. In the case of DDoS threats, prior to a ransom note, they often launch a small DDoS attack that's usually launched in the form of a demonstration. And this demo attack is typically over UDP that lasts about 30 to 120 minutes. And the note is not necessarily always sent to the right person. It's sent to group email aliases of the company that are publicly available online. In several cases, it even ends up in spam. In other cases, we've seen employees disregard the ransom note as spam, increasing the organization's response time, which results in further damage to their online properties. So what do you do if you receive a ransom note such as this? The first is we recommend that you don't pay the ransom. I think the Biden administration is also making it illegal for organizations to pay ransom to any targeted companies. Paying the ransom also encourages bad actors and finances illegal activities. And there's really no guarantee that attackers won't attack your network anyway. The second is notify your local law enforcement. They will also likely request a copy of the ransom letter that you've received. The third is contact Cloudflare. We're on standby. We've done this before. We've onboarded many customers. This is what we do, and this is what we do well. We can help ensure your website and network infrastructure are safeguarded from these ransom threats and attacks. But there's other steps you can take as well to be prepared. First is utilize an automated, always-on DDoS protection service. Don't rely on a reactive SOC-based DDoS protection service, which requires humans to analyze attack traffic. It just takes too long. Instead, onboard to a cloud service that has sufficient network capacity and automated DDoS mitigation systems. Second is work with your vendor to build and understand your threat model. We understand that every network is different, every company is different. Work with your DDoS protection vendor to tailor mitigation strategies to your workload. And the third is create a contingency plan and educate your employees. That's the best way to react very quickly. In many cases, as I mentioned before, attackers will send emails to publicly available email addresses of your employees, some of who might not even be technical or might not know what to do with a letter like that. So educate all of your employees, even the non-techies, on what they can do if they receive a ransom email. They should report it immediately to your security incident response team. Now, the attacks that we just talked about and the trends and insights that we've seen are all derived from our automated DDoS protection systems. So now let's take a look under the hood of what those systems have. Cloudflare today offers 3 different DDoS protection products designed to suit our customers' needs. One is, of course, we provide unmetered and unlimited DDoS protection for layers 3 to 7 for all of our customers. One is for DDoS protection for anything that's HTTP. It's a reverse proxy service, just as our web application firewall or CDN for mobile applications or websites or API gateways or SaaS applications. The second is a reverse proxy product for anything that runs over TCP or UDP protocol. So there's cryptocurrency exchanges, financial trading applications, or you might have this gaming server or a VPN server that's running on a custom protocol and is exposed to the internet and needs protection. And that's Cloudflare Spectrum. And finally, there's DDoS protection for your entire network infrastructure. And this is a BGP-based product. And I'll talk about this on the next slide. Magic Transit is a product that Cloudflare built really to protect our own data centers, our own networks. As we grew as a company over the last 10 years from having just a handful of data centers to data centers in over 200 cities across 100 plus countries, we were in the market to protect our own data centers against DDoS attacks. And us being an engineering company, we built this product from ground up where we used Anycast to advertise uh, public IP ranges from each of our data centers and then attract traffic to our data centers, where we then use our vast threat intelligence to filter out network layer DDoS attacks in now globally on average less than 3 seconds. We also have Magic Firewall, which is our firewalling as a service, where you can apply network firewall rules to further filter what traffic is allowed in. And it helps you create powerful rules to precisely allow or deny traffic in and out of your network. But essentially, how this product works is that the Cloudflare Edge data center uses BGP to announce the customer's routes to the world to ingest all the traffic directed to the customer's publicly addressable IP subnets. And once ingested by the edge data center closest to the source, the traffic is then inspected for any threats. And all clean traffic is then routed via direct connect to the customer's data center or encapsulated using GRE and tunneled from the Cloudflare data center to the customer's network. Now, a word of caution. Not all cloud providers are the same. While there's some benefits of using cloud-based mitigation, like it reduces the financial burden and eliminates the maintenance headaches that come with on-prem hardware appliances, make sure you pick the right provider, as some providers can actually introduce a traffic latency problem. And I can't stress on this enough. Most cloud DDoS mitigation providers today have a very small subset of distant data centers dedicating to quote unquote scrubbing network traffic for any threats. Much of the times, these scrubbing centers are far from the organization's network as well as from the requesting client. And this requires traffic to travel long distances before it's inspected for any threats, especially for users located globally in more remote regions. And backhauling traffic to a scrubbing center can add significant latency depending on its location relative to the destination server. And this back and forth travel is called the trombone effect, and it often creates noticeable and painful delays. Now, imagine if any additional layer 7 processing that might be required, like web application firewall inspection or content caching, is then typically processed in a different data center, which adds even further latency. And this problem only compounds when you use different cloud providers for different networking and network security functions. So if you're using, say, vendor A for DDoS mitigation, and vendor B for WAF inspection, and vendor C for CDN, every time your traffic hops from one cloud provider to another, latency is often measured in hundreds of milliseconds, which is absolutely unacceptable, as you might know, for most applications. But Cloudflare is different just because of how we're architected. We don't rely on centralized, dedicated distance scrubbing centers where you have to send your traffic for scrubbing specifically. We perform DDoS protection from every single server in every data center across all the cities that we have a presence in. This allows us to ingest customer traffic at a data center that's closest to the source of origin and mitigate attacks away from the customer's network in the cloud. And this is only possible because we operate, as I mentioned before at the start of the presentation, one of the world's largest networks with data centers strategically located in 200 cities across 100 plus countries. Our network is carrier agnostic, exceptionally well connected, and peer optimized. And we run the identical set of services available from each of our global points of presence. So whether you know us for CDN, WAF, serverless compute, DDoS mitigation, traffic acceleration, network firewalling, load balancing, or zero trust services, we're running that from every single server in every rack in every data center that we have a presence in. It's this unique architecture that gives us incredible flexibility in how we use our vast capacity and provides resilience against large attacks and network outages. It also means we can act fast. When you push new security policies, routing rules, or serverless applications, they're deployed globally in a matter of seconds. And that's why our autonomous mitigation system can detect and mitigate threats in under 3 seconds, which is one of the fastest in the industry. So to summarize what makes Cloudflare different and better, one, if I had to do just one word, there's one takeaway on this slide. It's really our network architecture because it serves as a foundation for all the services we deliver, and that's what differentiates us. We have a network capacity, which is also a DDoS mitigation capacity that's 90 terabits per second and growing. And this comes with built-in network security functionality like network firewalling, zero trust security, and everything else. And one consistent theme we've heard again and again from our customers is that as they make the journey to the cloud, they want performance, but not at the expense of security. Or they want robust security, but not at the expense of fast performance. So everything we build at Cloudflare, we build with performance and security in mind. So that when Wikimedia or a financial trading application deploys Magic Transit, for example, they'll not only be secure against attacks of any size or any kind, but also performance will be lightning fast because it's important to our customers. And every product we build at Cloudflare is built for customers of any size and any technical sophistication. We aim to build easy to use, intuitive products that solve complex problems for our customers where your deployment time is not days or weeks, but often within hours. We also don't charge for attack traffic, and we pioneered this in 2017. We were the first ones in the industry to introduce unmetered and unlimited DDoS protection. So when you are attacked, you don't have to submit a credit to Cloudflare to get that money back because we're not charging you in the first place. We're only charging you for clean traffic on your network, no matter how large the attack is. And finally, all our products are built in-house on our own servers, which means we're not dependent on third-party vendors. We can deploy patches, do firmware upgrades, leveraging the learnings from a very vast network very quickly. We're a company that's known for our innovation, and building software on commodity hardware really helps us innovate fast and even keep our costs down and really pass those savings to our customers. And I talked about learnings. I want to talk about that real quick. Our network is like an immune system for the internet because our threat intelligence, which harnesses data from that's fed from systems from nearly millions of properties that Cloudflare protects today. And our systems are constantly learning so that an attack against one customer in Chile protects another customer from a similar attack, whether the customer is in Cape Town or in India. Cloudflare is also widely recognized in the industry by analysts such as Forrester, Gartner, and IDC. In fact, Forrester recently came out with a report where they evaluated 11 of the most significant vendors in the market for DDoS mitigation, and we were named a leader, and we also received the highest score of all assessed vendors in the strategy category. How do we compare to other vendors? This is a slide that shows us that. This again goes back to how our unified network architecture gives us a DDoS mitigation capacity, which is also a network capacity of 90 terabits per second, which is higher than the next 5 competitors combined. We also can detect and mitigate attacks globally in under 3 seconds, which is also one of the fastest in the industries. If you have any questions or want to learn more about how we compare to other vendors, feel free to reach out to me and I'm happy to give you more information. So everyone knows Wikimedia. It's one of the most visited websites in the world. They experienced a massive DDoS attack in early September of 2019. We reached out to them to see how we can help. And within a few hours, we were able to onboard them with Magic Transit. And while they were struggling before to recover from some of the persistent attacks that they were seeing, which was knocking them offline, they were able to come back online, and not just come back online with Magic Transit, but they were also able to restore their global service with minimal impact to their latency. And they were so impressed with how, with Cloudflare's team and our product itself, that they extended that service now across all of the data centers globally. And finally, I want to close out with a slide on two projects which are very near and dear to all of us at Cloudflare. The first is called Project Galileo. Founded in 2014, Project Galileo is Cloudflare's response to cyber attacks launched against important yet vulnerable targets like artistic groups, humanitarian organizations, and voices of political dissent. As we continue to see DDoS attacks rise, it's important that we protect these vulnerable groups for the overall betterment of society. Cloudflare provides robust security to enterprises that are targets of DDoS and other cyber attacks. Cloudflare's Project Galileo has made that same security available for at-risk public interest websites at no cost. The second is the Athenian project, which protects election websites that are often targets of attacks and face vulnerabilities. We created the Athenian project to ensure that state and local governments have the highest level of protection and reliability for free so that their constituents have access to election information and voter registration. I began with our mission, and I'm closing with our mission as well. Cloudflare is a mission-driven company, and we are on a mission to help build a better internet. As one of the world's largest networks, we believe it is our duty to help protect the most vulnerable voices and most critical institutions on the internet. And projects such as these, along with the services we provide to our customers, enable us to do just that. With that, I'll open up the floor to questions. David?
All right, great. Thank you. Thank you, Vivek, for that informative presentation. As a reminder to our viewers, if you have a question, just select the Q&A button at the bottom of the console. If we're not able to answer your question during the broadcast, you'll receive an email response to it within a few days. Okay, so it looks like we have some questions. So let's begin our Q&A session. Vivek, our first question is, do you have a recommendation on on-demand versus always-on modes for DDoS protection deployment?
That's a great question. For our listeners, there's two different methods of deployment: on demand and always on. Always on is when you have your DDoS protection, cloud DDoS protection vendor always in front of your network, whereas on demand is only when only in wartime, only when you're attacked do you turn on the DDoS protection system, and that's the only time that your traffic is diverted to the vendor and inspected for threats, and only clean traffic goes to you. Now, with most other vendors, you have to worry about network latency. Imagine the case when you're under attack. Most vendors require you to call them, pick up the phone and call them, and when under attack, to turn on their services. Then they take about 30 minutes to over an hour to turn their service on, because this is how PGP propagation works. As we saw on the slides earlier, most of the attacks will have done enough harm by then. And then they reroute all your network traffic to a distance scrubbing center, which increases latency even further. But with Cloudflare, and really one thing to keep in mind is that the on-demand way of mitigating attacks is really a byproduct of on-premises vendors moving to the cloud. Because if you think about it, we didn't have on-demand or always on in the on-premises world, but when they moved to the cloud, because there was so much latency involved because of these very far and few distant scrubbing centers, that they had to now come up with two different modes where your traffic is only diverted when you're under attack. But with Cloudflare, there's really no worry. There's none of this, because of course we offer both modes, but we recommend always on to our customers, and really for a few reasons. The first is that there's no latency penalty with Cloudflare. In fact, we've seen that traffic over our network is faster than the public internet. That's because we have this global network. We're able to ingest traffic very close to the source of origin and then route it over low latency links over our network. But you still have full control over your network. So if you're a network architect who wants to not have an additional man in the middle, or not have additional troubleshooting issues, we still provide you with detailed network analytics, where you can see when you're attacked, what's your ingress traffic, what your egress traffic is, what the threats are, how Cloudflare mitigated them automatically, and all of that. And with always on, mitigation is automatic and just faster due to the nature of how it works. So most of our customers see these advantages with us and then choose to deploy with an in the always on mode.
All right, Vivek, our next question.
Next question, David.
Reads, yeah, our next question reads, we are in the process of looking at various cloud vendors to transition some of our network services from on-prem. What should we keep in mind when picking a cloud vendor for DDoS and other network security services?
Not all cloud providers are the same. As I pointed out in one of my earlier slides too, a lot of times there's, again, security issues and latency issues to consider, especially if you have multiple cloud vendors in the mix that you're dealing with. And thinking about all the networking services you want, so there's DDoS protection is just one facet of it, right? There's DDoS, there's firewalling, there's load balancing. And what if you had a separate cloud vendor for each? It really, I mean, there's that could be a lot to deal with, but it really breaks down into three different things: latency, cost, and support. In the on-prem world, latency and support weren't really an issue. Your packet took microseconds maybe to go from one box in your rack to another. But now, if you use, say, Cloudflare for DDoS mitigation and vendor B for load balancing and vendor C for firewalling, your packet has to travel from one cloud provider to another. This adds latency. And when previously you had to troubleshoot something, it was easy, right? In the on-prem world, you'd unplug a box. I know I've done that in the lab many times, and one after another to see where the issue was. You can't really do that with the cloud. And if you call up one cloud provider, they'll probably point the finger to the other cloud provider and say they're the problem. So it probably helps for you to consolidate your services, if possible, with the same cloud provider. And cost-wise too, cloud providers are incentivized to pass savings onto you if you use them for multiple services. So my recommendation would be look for cloud providers offering multiple networking functions that work together and work natively with each other. Of course, there'll be issues with some management if they've acquired different companies. So try to go with cloud providers, actually like Cloudflare, where everything is built natively into the same dashboard, which makes management also easier. This reduces the number of network hops as well on the data plane, where that traffic has to make, resulting in reduced latency. And so that translates to faster application performance and better user experience for your end users. And even when you're troubleshooting networking problems or network security problems, you have one vendor to call. You have one throat to choke. And as I mentioned, like bundling multiple functions often also results in lower costs. So bottom line is look for a cloud provider with a broad global presence that has the capability to support multiple users no matter where they are and provide multiple network and security functions no matter where you are located or where your users are located.
All right. Another question for you, Vivek. Does Cloudflare detect attacks at every data center?
We do. We have data centers in over 200 cities and across 100 plus countries, and we have except for the China network, which works slightly differently. We have different DDoS mitigation systems. One of them is called DOSD, which is looking at packets and inspecting packets at a much faster rate at each and every data center. So it provides local mitigation. And then there's also a centralized, so that's our decentralized system, DOSD. And then there's also a centralized mitigation system called Gatebot, which, and you can read about these on our blogs as well, which really is looking at, the bigger picture of what the attacks are and detects and mitigates volumetric attacks. And these two, along with FlowTrackD, which is our asymmetric DDoS mitigation system, works in concert with DOSD and Gatebot to really provide that comprehensive detection and mitigation. So the short answer is yes, we do provide DDoS mitigation at every one of our data centers, except for the China network. And the reason we're able to do it is because, as I mentioned, we have a very unified network architecture where we provide all of these services across the whole network and security stack across all of our data centers. And the benefit to you is that your traffic is ingested into Cloudflare's network closest to the source of origin, no matter where the eyeball is. And attack traffic is mitigated in the cloud and absorbed in the cloud way before it reaches your network.
All right, great. Thank you, Vivek. Those are all the questions we have for today's presentation. Thank you again to Vivek for being with us today and sharing such valuable information. Also, thanks to Cloudflare for sponsoring this webcast. And of course, thank you, our audience, for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed the presentation.